We don't have need for fighters of KKK to come to Kobane, and just what we call the international force to give us some ammunition and some heavy weaponry that are effective against the heavy weaponry of ISIS. We didn't do any call for troops, for landed troops, not by the international community, no by KKK or other Kurdish organizations or political parties. Just we call for help, for weaponry and for ammunition. This is what we need, not fighters on the ground.
Now, Lawrence Cobb, are you confident in any way, let's just say, if Ankara is able to join in the coalition and agree to help, do you think Turkey and the fighters near Kobane, the Kurdish fighters, would be able to work together?
Well, I think that's really up to Turkey. I think the fighters around Kobane would be more than happy to see the Turks, at least in the short term. But as we've been talking about here, a lot of the countries are concerned about the long-term impact of this. I mean, even if you can save Kobane, then what do you do with Assad? Are you basically, if you can repel ISIL from taking Kobane, are you enhancing the power of Assad? And I think that's what people are concerned. And this becomes very complex because in Iraq, the coalition is basically being helped by Iran. But Iran has a different agenda in Syria, and I think that's what some people in Turkey are concerned about. If they do this, are they in fact going to enhance Assad's power? So you have all of these complex dynamics, and you have to take these things one at a time. I do think it would be very significant if Turkey came in with ground forces, because they are a Muslim country. They have a very effective military. They're a member of NATO, and that would show that it's not just a struggle between, if you will, the West and a Islamic fundamentalist, but basically it is countries in the Muslim world who do not like what ISIL does and stands for.
Lawrence, it's interesting that you mention Iran, because Iran has weighed in on the situation as well. Now, Iranian leaders have warned Turkey to stay out of the conflict in Syria and Iraq. Tehran is an ally of Syria's President Bashar al-Assad, and Major General Yadollah Javani, who's a senior political figure in Iran's Revolutionary Guard, recently said if Turkey does not correct its behavior, the Syrian and Iraqi crises will undoubtedly become Turkish crises as well. And its leaders should not be deceived by America's displayed actions. Unfortunately, Turkish authorities have no understanding of developments in the world, and not only do their actions not provide national and world security, but in the near distant future will pose risks for the internal security of that country. Akin Unver, are we about to see another regional spat here between Turkey and Iran over ISIL, over Syria?
Well, I mean, there's a limit to how much Turkish-Iranian relations can deteriorate, as well as how much they can improve. Turkish-Iranian relations have to have somewhat of a, sustained rivalry would be the best term to put it, because both countries cooperate in certain areas, but there are, historical, centuries-old differences that haven't been resolved since Ottoman and Safavid times. And basically, when you boil Turkish-Iranian rivalry, it always boils down to the question of sectarian balance of power. Iran, mainly because it has been worried about an American attack or an American, invasion of some sort. Its main policy was to basically expand its influence zone and follow the policy of expanding its militant infrastructure, as well as expanding its uninvisible assets around its territory. But when you see from the perspective of Ankara, it's basically a move to change the sectarian balance of power. So Ankara basically argues that the reason why ISIL happened is that Iran and Syria, as well as Iraq with the case of Maliki, they engage in a very sharp and very aggressive policy to change the sectarian balance of power. Iran disagrees, and that's one of the issues that cannot be resolved in the foreseeable future.
Right. Idris, Nassan, we're just running out of time here, but I want to ask you, just tell us what would be the consequences if Turkey does not join the coalition soon?
Yeah, I think the international community as a whole, must respond to the ISIS, fighters that are attacking hard to the town of, to the city of Kobane, not just Turkey, and also Turkey for other reasons must part of this international coalition because when ISIS controls Kobane, it will be again on the border of Turkey, and this is very dangerous for Turkey as a country too, and also because we in Kobane, the YPG and the Democratic Autonomous Administration, we believe that we are part of the international community coalition against the ISIS, and so when we are on the ground of Kobane, we're not just protecting ourselves and our houses or our people. We are fighting for the international community as a whole. So I think Turkey, as an important member of NATO and also an important member of the international community, must be a member of the coalition and act strongly against ISIS by sharing in the airstrikes and also by opening the border for crossing help and weaponry and ammunition for fighters on the ground, which are YPG fighters.
Right. Now, Lawrence, I'm just running out of time here. I want to give you the last word. What is the likelihood that the longer Turkey hesitates in joining this coalition and sets up more conditions, that the worse will be the outcome?
Well, I think so. The longer Turkey hesitates on coming in, as our last guest just pointed out, if they were to come in, it would really be significant, and it would be good for them because if Kobane falls, it's right on their border. So I think in their own self-interest, they ought to be coming in, even aside from the concerns about Assad and Iran and all of these other issues. And I hope Turkey, which played a very important role in the Cold War, will step up to the plate.
Well, thank you to all my guests for joining us today, Akin Unver, Lawrence Cobb and Idris Nassan. And thank you too for watching. Do feel free to add your voice to this discussion. You can always leave your comments on our Facebook. That's at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. We're also on Twitter. Look for us on @AJ Inside Story. I'm Fauzia Ibrahim from the team and myself. Thanks for watching.
The Turkish Prime Minister says Kurdish rebels will drown in blood. This after at least a dozen Turkish soldiers were killed in attacks by fighters of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. The government's peace initiative lasted less than a year. How did things get out of control? And how will this renewed conflict unfold? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. It's a 26-year-old conflict that has claimed more than 40,000 lives. Kurdish separatists have been fighting the Turkish government to create an ethnic homeland within Turkey since 1984. Earlier this month, the rebels dismissed a year-old ceasefire because of what they called Turkey's continuing hostility to the Kurdish people. The violence escalated on Saturday, claiming the lives of 11 Turkish soldiers and those of at least 12 members of the Kurdish Workers' Party, or PKK. As Turkish leaders gathered to mourn the deaths of the soldiers, the country's prime minister denounced the PKK and vowed to crush them.
They will dry in their own swamp, and they will drown in their own blood. We have never fallen into intimidation, and we never will fall. We have never given up hope, and we never will. We have never surrendered to the spiral of violence, and we never will in the future.
These strong words followed years of attempting to implement reforms for Turkey's Kurd minority, and at the same time initiating dialogue with the neighboring countries who have substantial Kurdish populations. Shortly after Erdogan's government came to power in 2002, it ended the long-imposed state of emergency in the Kurdish areas southeast of the country. In mid-2009, Erdogan announced new steps to solve the Kurdish conflict, known as the Kurdish Opening. This initiative included a series of steps with the intention of achieving peace. Erdogan promised to allow Kurdish language education, permit Kurdish names to be given to children, and allowed the first Kurdish language TV channel to open. But at the end of last year, the courts banned the Kurdish Democratic Society Party, or DTP, claiming it had links to the PKK. And since then, the Prime Minister's Kurdish initiative has failed to make any substantial progress. Well, joining us now to discuss this are our guests. In Ankara, Saban Dishli, advisor to the Turkish Prime Minister on Foreign Affairs. In Baghdad, Mahmoud Othman, Kurdish MP in the Iraqi Parliament. In London, Fadi Hakura, Turkey specialist and an associate fellow at Chatham House. Let's begin with Saban Dishli in Ankara. Is this an end to what the Prime Minister called the Kurdish Opening?
Definitely not. And as you referred to Prime Minister's speech during the ceremony of the soldiers who were killed, he very deliberately and underlining definitely that this opening program, democratization initiative, will definitely continue. The most important thing here is, of course, the balance between the security and the freedom. Security is very important. Also, the other very important issue is we have to separate between the terrorists, they are the same everywhere, and the Kurdish issue. We have started the initiative to deal with the Kurdish issue in economic affairs, in social affairs. If you look at the investments, the projects, big multi-billion-dollar projects in Eastern Anatolia, so-called the South Anatolian Project, Eastern Anatolian Project, mass housing projects, the highways, the schools, the hospitals, new airports, the economic parts of this issue is continued. Also, as you have referred, opening a Kurdish language channels with TRT, opening institutes in the universities to study Kurdish cultures and whatever. All those initiatives has taken place and will continue. And both Minister of Interior as well stated it, and the Prime Minister.
Let me just pick up on something that you said, Saban Dishli, and I would like to take it to Mahmoud Othman in Baghdad. We heard there from the Prime Minister's spokesman that the separation has got to be made between Kurdish people and terrorists. From your view in Baghdad, do you see this type of distinction being made in Iraq's borders and the southeast of Turkey?
Well, I'm glad that he's saying this, but they are not practically implementing that. Actually, the ones the Turkish government called terrorists, these people are having a lot of support inside the Kurds of Turkey. You can't separate. And I think to use force against them wouldn't end the problem. It has been used for the last 26 years. And still there is no end to it. So I think the question is political. It's not a question of terrorism. It's a question of people in Turkey who have identity. They want to have their identity. They want to have their rights. Even in the last local election, Mr. Erdogan himself, he said this was a vote for identity, not for services. So anyway, I think if there is a bit of a revision of the Turkish policy and some reforms, they could solve this problem altogether. I am glad that the Erdogan government is making some opening on the Kurdish issue. It's better than previous governments, of course. But I hope that will go to the end and there will be more reforms, some changes in the constitution, and try to pursue peace and dialogue in solving this problem. I'm sure it will be solved easily. But through force, I think it will be more complicated, and it's sorry. One is sorry to have Turks killed, Kurds killed, destruction, and no end to it, as we see always, escalation without having any end, but more complications.
Well, Fadi Hakura in London, is the possibility of dialogue with the PKK possible in any way? And do you think that this is a critical issue?
I think at the present time, any kind of dialogue, whether direct or indirect, is practically impossible. Turkey is now entering an election period. It is expected that next year, perhaps in May or June of next year, general elections will take place. And given now the level of violence now in the southeast of Turkey between the Turkish military and the PKK or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, I see any kind of dialogue highly unlikely at the present time.
Well, Saban Dishli, let me put that back to you in Ankara. The issue of the whole Kurdish problem could possibly become an election issue. The Prime Minister and his government have actually staked their political platform on reforms with regards to the Kurdish minority in Turkey. Is this a political problem for the Prime Minister and his party?
No, we never had any election-minded policies, whether in economy. If you look at our 4 previous elections, we wouldn't run an election economy. We wouldn't do any election-related policies because we are seeing this as a long-term issue. Of course, as you rightly mentioned, this is almost 30 years continuing problem for Turkey. And unfortunately, whenever Turkey has shown some improvements in various areas, this thing starts picking up. We do not have, as Justice and Development Party, any problem whatsoever with the Kurdish people or the Kurdish original citizens. And all our activities are directed to further democratization, further bettering economic and social lives and the cultural rights, as mentioned. And all those things, when you go and talk where we have a big AK Party, Justice and Development Party organization in the regions. We are all the time with our MPs, with our prime ministers, with our party members, with the people. They also want this democratization process to continue. Therefore, we don't see it as an election problem, and we have seen in the previous elections tremendous support to our party from that region. We are, except 1 cities in Turkey, #1 party in all south and southeastern cities of Turkey. Therefore, this is not an election issue. This is not a Kurdish problem issue. This is a pure terror. Terrorists continue to create a kind of environment for themselves so they can pull up more people to the mountains, more support from the people as things develop there. If you look at the recent investments, we have built, as I mentioned, almost 60 new schools we built in Turkey are built in those provinces, in those cities. The hospitals, the social program, social support program, each kids going to school, the government pays his or her mother, not the father, the mother, certain amount of money so that he can spend for better education of the schools.
Well, looking at all these reforms, Saban Dishli, looking at these reforms that the government has made internally, it does appear to be a two-phase approach. Internal political democratic reforms, but at the same time as well, the Erdogan government has been involved very strongly in external dialogue with its neighbors. Syria, for example, discussions with Iraq. Mahmoud Othman in Baghdad, do you see a two-phase process like this underway, that the Turkish government or the Erdogan government, since it's been in power, has been looking internally, but at the same time very strongly externally?
Well, actually, I think there have been some reforms inside. But when you look at it, look, all these talks they made with Syria, they make with Iran, they make cooperation with the Iraqi government. They're trying to end this problem. This is an internal problem. It's a problem of millions of Kurds who are living inside Turkey. Some of them are in the mountains. That's right. They are carrying arms, but they have been carrying arms to defend their rights. And if they have been given a real amnesty, maybe a lot of them would have gone back to Turkey, try to be a legal party, working politically as a civil party and not through violence. And if Turkey, for example, if the Turkish government could, I don't say they should open dialogue with PKK now. Let them open dialogue with BDP, which is a legal Kurdish party, which has the Kurds, they have been elected to Turkish parliament through Turkish law. These people are in Turkish parliament. Why don't they talk to these people about this issue and try to take their points of view on how to go and solve it? I think this is the issue. The issue is that it couldn't be simply solved through violence. They have used violence the last 26 years. What were the results? So I think if they look at it carefully and talk about it with the people who are in Turkey, not the people in the mountain. Let them not talk to the people in the mountain. Talk to the people who are in the municipalities. Talk to the people who are in Turkish parliament, the Kurds. And there is an issue, and this issue has to be tackled. It's a national issue. It's not an issue of social and economic reforms only. It's an issue of a people who think they should have an identity, they should have their rights, within Turkey, of course. So that is the issue to be tackled, I think.
Well, Fadi Hakura in London, is this an internal issue largely?
It is an internal issue, but I would not characterize it as a Kurdish problem. What Turkey really needs is a democracy initiative, a general democratic initiative for all the citizens of Turkey. Turks and Kurds have a lot of cultural linkages together. The rates of intermarriage between Kurds and Turks is now tenfold compared to 30 years ago. Also, also Kurds occupy some of the most senior positions of government in Turkey. So what's really needed is a general democratic initiative for all the citizens of Turkey, a new civilian secular constitution, as well as a more liberal state for all the citizens of Turkey.
Well, let's just take a pause here and take a look at exactly who is the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. For 3 decades, the movement has been battling Turkey for a Kurdish homeland with well over 40,000 people killed. This group is banned in many countries, with the United States and the European Union both labeling it a terrorist organization, as does Turkey, despite intermittent efforts at resolving the conflict. In 1999, Abdullah Öcalan, leader of the PKK, was captured and sentenced to death. In 2002, this was commuted to life imprisonment when Turkey abolished the death penalty. In October 2007, following a security pact between Turkey, Iraq and the US, the Turkish parliament gave the go-ahead for military operations in Iraq in pursuit of Kurdish rebels. 2 months later, Turkey launched a series of airstrikes on fighters from the PKK movement inside Iraq. That round of conflict ended with a tenuous ceasefire, but in recent weeks, renewed violent clashes have left both Turkish soldiers, PKK fighters, and of course a number of civilians dead. Fadi Hakura in London, there has been ongoing violence in this decade-long conflict. Is there any reason whatsoever that this conflict can be resolved through violence?
I think that this conflict is an unwinnable war between Turkey, between the Turkish military and the PKK, or the Kurdistan Workers' Party. The PKK can definitely not defeat the Kurdish military, but neither could the Turkish military defeat the PKK. What you have seen is a cycle of violence. Violence breeds more violence, and taking a very security-focused approach to the Kurdish issue, I think, has not yielded positive results for the resolution of this problem in Turkey.
Well, the Turkish army is the second most powerful in NATO, for example. Saban Dishli in Ankara, is there concern among this government that just as previous governments have failed to end this crisis by force, that this is going to be the result yet again?
No, I just want to comment in a few items the previous speakers from Baghdad has said, talking to MPs. We have in our party 76 Kurdish origin MPs. We are also, when we design those openings or the economic initiatives whatsoever, we are talking with those MPs as well. And one thing, talking to BDP, remember recently we were trying to change the constitution, and there was one item there which BDP also voted no. That was making the party closure difficult, or actually totally forbidding them, instead of punishing people who were reasoned to close the parties. Therefore, the dialogues is totally open. We have strong dialogues with the Kurdish people, with all, wherever they are. And our party, Justice and Development Party, we have every month with 3 independent inquiries, the enquêteurs, making public opinions and asking questions in every sort, both to Turkish or the Kurdish peoples and everyone. Therefore, we are doing everything we could do. Thirdly, then I will come back to your questions. We have dialogue with Iraq. We have dialogue with the northern Iraq people.
Those points taken, but let's get on to that question about, is force still going to be practiced, and does the government believe it can succeed?
Definitely, we will succeed. We have to succeed, and we have there the three-party committee agreement, the United States, Iraqi government, and Turkish government, to share information and to fight against terror. And I think we will do everything in social, economic, but as well as military means to stop this. And,
well, Mahmoud Othman in Baghdad, let me put to you, we had there the agreement that has been reached between Turkey and the US, but that conflict, that force being used, is used sometimes in Iraq itself as well. This does pose a threat to stability, certainly within that area of Iraq and in the country as a whole, does it not?
Well, actually, we don't like that conflict to continue. It affects us negatively. Definitely, we have been always saying, and even the last declaration was by Mr. Barzani, who visited Turkey officially 2 weeks ago. He said that he is willing, first of all, he called on Kurds of Turkey to cooperate with the government of Erdogan on the opening policy towards Kurds. This is one. Secondly, he said, all the Kurds, we are ready to cooperate with the Turkish government to solve this problem. Of course, we think, and on our side, that this is a political problem. It could be solved, for example, but not by force. For example, PKK, many times in the last year, 3-4 times, they made ceasefire, one-sided. And then had the Turkish government responded as an amnesty or something like that, that would have opened the way to solve this problem. But they never responded to that, saying that this is a terrorist, and try to fight it and never ended in fighting, then where does it go? This is a vicious circle. It goes around and around with victims without the end. We want to have a solution that could have the end. If these people are persuaded to go back to Turkey and try to work there as a legal party or politically, not through violence, not carrying arms, leave their arms, and then solve the problem one way or another, that would be the best way to get rid of it, not just try to fight it, because in those mountains you fight on both sides of the frontier. Civilians and people, innocent people on both sides, in Iraqi Kurdistan, and Turkey also will be suffering, and a lot of people will be killed, and Turks will be killed, Kurds will be killed, but there will be no end to this organization or this movement.
Well, Fadi Hakura in London,
right.
Briefly, what is the solution? We've heard the debate about it. We've heard the causes from various points of view. But is there a clear solution, do you believe, that might be missed by the politicians involved?
Well, the solution is a concerted effort at increasing democracy across all of Turkey, trying to eliminate the culture of violence that exists in the southeast of Turkey. For example, the Turkish government has been funding so-called village guards, around 60,000 village guards that with arms and money. So this against the PKK. So this culture of violence, more democracy, and more and tackling the socioeconomic feudal problems in the southeast of Turkey, I think would go a long way to resolving the Kurdish issue in Turkey.
Well, Saban Dishli, very briefly, you heard there the views of Fadi Hakura, the culture of violence. Do you think this is something that the government is looking at?
We would use all the means. I think the most important thing is recently we have seen from various European countries as declared PKK as terrorist organization. They are trying efforts to cut their financial routes because they were getting a lot of finance from some European states illegally with force and whatever. The village guards, you have to protect the Kurdish citizens from them as well, because any investments the government is trying to bring there, they are attacking, burning the machineries. They don't want any investment. Even the schools, they are killing the teachers, the normal teachers. They don't want the improvements in economic, in social, and in everywhere there, so they can capture more supporters from the people. So,
well, let's see what happens with that support from the people in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks to our guests, Saban Dishli in Ankara, Fadi Hakura in London, and Mahmoud Uthman in Baghdad. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Mike Hanna. Goodbye for now.
Heute informierte sich Ursula von der Leyen vor Ort. Ausbildungsziel: der Umgang mit der Panzerabwehrrakete Milan. 500 Stück wird die Bundesregierung den Peschmerga im Nordirak bis Ende Oktober zur Verfügung stellen. Dort werden die Waffen dringend gebraucht, so ein Peschmerga, der ohne Namen bleiben will. Die IS-Extremisten sind absolut unberechenbar, weil sie für ihr fanatisches Ziel kämpfen. Außerdem hat die IS modernste Waffen, die wir nicht besitzen und gegen die wir bisher nicht ankämpfen können. Die Bundesregierung hat eine neue militärische Verantwortung übernommen. Dafür will Ursula von der Leyen mehr Geld ab 2016.
The soldiers being trained are Kurds, the place northern Iraq. The trainers are Israelis. Their governments denied this was happening, but now Newsnight has obtained the first pictures of it and spoken to an Israeli who took part.
Day by day it's a bit tense because you know where you are and you know who you are, and there's always a chance that you'll get found out.
Why then were former Israeli commandos training Kurds in northern Iraq? Was it Israeli freelancers trying to cash in on Iraq's multi-billion-dollar private security boom? Or was this something both governments condoned? The sensitivities for the Kurdish authorities in admitting it are certainly enormous, since their political enemies have long accused them of being in cahoots with Israel.
These are not new allegations for us. Back in the 60s and 70s, we were called the second Israel in the region, and we were supposed to be eliminated by militant nationalist and now Islamist groups. They look for internal enemies, and since we are the easiest to target, these kind of speculations has been around in the region for more than 30 years.
The Kurdistan region sits at a strategic crossroads. To the east, Iran. To the northwest, Turkey. Both countries have significant Kurdish minorities. The authorities in northern Iraq have accepted that the long-cherished dream of Kurdish statehood is not possible for now, and that they must remain part of a federal Iraq. As they develop their region, the Kurds have opened an international airport at Erbil. It now boasts dozens of flights each week. It's here, at Hawla International, that the Israelis began their work.
The fact of the matter is that each day when you open the newspapers, Israel is gearing up for a war against another country, another innocent, often defenseless people. This past week they talk about a second attack, or Operation Cast Lead 2 against Gaza. Then they talk about attacking Lebanon. Then they talk about attacking Iran. I think it is correct to say that in the modern world, in the contemporary world, there is really no state quite like Israel. Israel is off the cliff. It's become a lunatic state.
America and Israel share an unbreakable bond.
AIPAC is one of the reasons why.
All of us share a fundamental belief that the freedom and security of Israel are a vital interest of the United States of America.
We need you now more than ever.
Between 2000 until 2009, around 6,700 children were detained. That's not a mistake. That's not something that's confusing to the Israeli military. Children are being abused throughout the
being targeted?
They are being targeted.
What is being done to the Palestinians now is horrendous. In their own territory, by the occupying powers, which is Israel. They've taken away all the basic human rights of the Palestinians. But there's no doubt that within the occupied territories, Palestinian land, that there is a horrendous example of apartheid.
כל רמאללה זה ג'ונגל, יש שם קופים, כלבים, גורילות. הבעיה שהחיות עכשיו סגורות שם, הם לא יוצאים. מה? לא, אנחנו בני אדם, הם חיות. להם אין צלם אנוש, לנו יש. זה ההבדל בין... מה? תצלם, אכפת לי, אני חושבת, למי שנראה לך. זה גם הרמטכ"ל יגיד.
A three-day Russell Tribunal in Cape Town, South Africa, brought together key political and legal minds to determine that Israel is operating under an apartheid system. But people want more than this groundbreaking result. They want change.
We are demanding Israel to stop this racist system and to change it. and to admit and recognize equal national and civic rights for the Palestinians, because it is our homeland, because we didn't immigrate to Israel, because it was Israel who immigrated to us, because we didn't immigrate to Israel, because it was Israel who immigrated to us.
If someone came inside your home, you came home and you found someone in your home, and you asked them why you're here, you said, because in the scripture that God gave to me, he said that this house here belonged to me. You would say, no, get out of my house. So they kill your father, they kill your brother, they kill your uncle, they kill everybody except the children. And they stay in that house. And those children they did not kill, even though they cannot get back in the house again. Every time those children pass by that house, they pick up a stone and they throw it at that house. And those people in the house, they shoot at those children. I would ask you, are those children criminals? If they came, if those children, if that's all they could do was throw a rock at those people that took your house, would those children be criminals? The person said, no, that's a very pathetic situation. I said, that is the condition of Palestine. There's nothing but children throwing stones, facing tanks. But that's all they can do. And I say that if Allah only gives to the children of Palestine rocks to throw and the heart to face tanks, they must face the tanks and they must continue to throw stones.
Boys are gathering near the border to throw stones at Israeli bulldozers.
Because that is an act of honor. And if there are no more men to throw stones, to carry the honor of those people, then the children, they must continue to throw stones until there is no one else to throw a stone.
When my great parents, came from Russia, in 150 years ago, they came because there was a Bible in one hand. My great-grandfather from Dnepropetrovsk came with a Bible in one hand and a rifle in another, and his hand was extended to the Arabs who lived here. Some did make business with him, others who fought him had to meet the wrath of his rifle. And that's how you live in the Middle East. We are a people who want to survive. We succeeded in surviving because we were able to defend ourselves, to stand up throughout the centuries.
Go ahead,
Without
Norman.
that, we wouldn't have been there. That's why we are an endangered species.
All right, let's go to Norman here. Go ahead.
It is an oddity that you say you're coming and you want to live in peace with somebody. You come with a rifle in your hand. I often have friends visit me at my home, and when they come to my home, they don't come with a rifle.
So did the first settlers in the United States of America.
You have to ask yourself, I appreciate Dr. Gissen's comparison because I think it's exactly right. The first Euro-Americans who came to North America came with a rifle in hand because they came with the intention of displacing and dispossessing the indigenous population. That's why they needed a rifle. And most Americans nowadays at least acknowledge the fact that what was done to the indigenous population of North America was wrong. And it's exactly for the same reason that Israel, or I should say Jews from Eastern Europe, had to come to Israel or Palestine with a rifle in hand, because their intention was not to live with the indigenous population, but to displace and dispossess it in order to create a Jewish state in an area which was overwhelmingly Arab. And I think pretty much everything that ensued after that followed from that basic fact.
I know both from the moral sense and from the practical sense that the only way to stop the violence is to treat the root cause from which the violence has started.
The number one myth that Westerners have about this conflict is that Arabs and Jews have been fighting for thousands of years and they're going to continue to fight.
This is really quite bizarre because all it takes is a little bit of reading of history to find out that this just isn't true. There is no congenital historical enmity between the Arabs and the Jews. The Jews flourished in the Arab world at a time when they were being persecuted throughout all of Europe.
At the end of the 19th century, because of anti-Semitism in Europe, European Jews began to try and figure out a solution to the Jewish problem. A very small minority adhered to Zionism, the idea that the only place in which they could be safe is within a Jewish state.
Zionist Jews actually had a design on the land of Palestine, the idea of creating a homeland for Jews in the land of Palestine. And this is really the beginning of the conflict.
The concept for Jews to have a state is expressly forbidden in the Torah, in the Jewish teaching, since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. We were told by the Almighty in a prophecy of King Solomon and that we are forbidden to have our own entity, our own state, our own kingdom, even in an uninhabited land. And this was held by all Jews around the world for thousands of years. And it makes it worse, compounds the sin, the crime in having the state, because this state of Israel that these nationalists made it in Palestine, made it in a land that was inhabited by the majority Muslim people, by the Palestinian people.
Villagers were expelled en masse, and massacres occurred in many places. The villages of Hula, Saliyah, and Bassa were but a few to suffer such atrocities during 1948. Once Zionist troops occupied a village that resisted them, they would round up all the men according to lists the intelligence officers would provide. On the whim of the local commander, they would either shoot them or march them away. The biggest expulsion and massacre happened in the city of Lid Ramle. 50,000 people were expelled from the city in a single day. 426 men, women, and children were killed by the Zionist forces. The general in charge of the occupation and expulsion of Lid Ramle was Yitzhak Rabin, who would later become Israel Prime Minister, serving 2 terms. In 1948, the Chicago Sunday Times reported on the Israeli tactics. Practically everything in their way died. Riddled corpses lay by the side of the roads. The New York Herald Tribune wrote, "The corpses of Arab men, women, and even children strewn about in the wake of the ruthlessly brilliant charge." The London Economist reported, "The Arab refugees were systematically stripped of all of their belongings. Then, they were sent on their trek to the frontier."
among the people that conquered Akko. When we were walking around, we entered the flat. There was a pair of shoes of a small child, maybe 2 years old. They didn't have time to put on the shoes, so they left the shoes and they ran away. They left everything.
We found out that there was a systematic expulsion of Palestinians, and there was, as I said, there was an ethnic cleansing operation taking place.
The most infamous campaign was the massacre at the village of Deir Yassin, where over 100 men, women, and children were systematically murdered.
هذا البيت ما كان متخبين فيه أنا وولادي وأخويا موسى. بكاليت أنا معيد أخوي موسى مشاكل نتونس في الله فيه. هذا البيت. أجي قالوا لما كنا بالبيت كنا مش كسر ثبتنا الكنبلة وجينا ست صوبتنا وبنت الصواب تمسحوا ولادي وكان بعد ما راحت المراكة الحالة كانت تكسر الباب علينا وطلعونا بدهم يقتلوا مسدبة فيه على وجه المقتلو اتناولت 250 نيرة من عدة وقلت يا خواجة بس مشان الله الطالب انت قلت لسه قال لي كتير انت كويس وهات المصاري وهات كوتش الحنو شو نسوي فيها كوتش الحنو أجراك يا ويلي هي زوجتك على السلام تحلو هذا لك يعود حتى في الضمس هيك ويكون أصفي موسى كدابة حتى 5 3 مليون تحت راسها